Hey everyone! Before we dive in, we want to give a big shout out to TACA, the Arts Community Alliance, and Moody Fund for the Arts. This season of Dance Behind the Screen podcast is powered in part by their support. Because of them, you're getting free episodes wherever you listen, full video interviews on YouTube, and our amazing guests receive an artist stipend. If you love what we do and want to support the work, head over to knowvoxdance.com. All right, let's get into it.
No Box Dance presents Dance Behind the Screen, process production, and social media. Don't forget, say no to the box. Dile no a la caja. 고정관념 일의 상자에서 벗어나세요.
Welcome back to Dance Behind the Screen podcast, where dance technology and creativity converge. I'm your host, Martheya, and today's episode is titled The Blueprint for Creative Impact with Suzanne Smith. Suzanne Smith is a trailblazer in the social sector, reimagining what's possible at the intersection of nonprofit, government, and business for nearly 3 decades. As the founder and CEO of Social Impact Architects, she is a sought-after educator, speaker, and the author of Social Trend Spotter blog on Substack. Suzanne empowers changemakers to dream bigger and lead smarter. Through bold ideas and practical frameworks, she helps leaders turn vision into meaningful, lasting impact. We have the honor and privilege of learning from Suzanne through the TACA Arts Accelerator program. Suzanne, welcome to the show and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is such a thrill.
In another podcast show you were on, you described the challenge you face when people ask what you do versus who you are, because you wear so many hats. And I really love that you talked about this, because I personally, and I think many artists who are listening can definitely relate. For our listeners who might not know you, who are you?
It's such a great question. This is one of those things where if I could evolve our civilization right now, I would evolve it a little bit. And I'd actually go backwards, because at the founding of the United States, our founding fathers and our founding mothers had lots of different hats. They were a farmer, they were a writer, they were this, they were that. For whatever reason, as we have shifted into the 20th century and the 21st centuries, you get put into the box of you're a lawyer, you're a professor, you're this, and it puts people into a space where the profession is the thing that you ask people out at the happy hour. What do you do? And I always like asking people the question, what are you excited about these days? And sometimes the thing that people are most excited about is a side hustle that they're working on, or a book that they're reading, or something like that. And just so you know, I'm a true Jeffersonian in the fact that I do wear a lot of hats, and I am unapologetic about it, because I do think that all these different hats come together to create a lot of synergy. And I think artists get this probably better than anybody else, because they are constantly pulling from everything to try to figure out what is new and what is next. So I see them bringing things in from biology and chemistry and different things. Let me give you a couple of my different hats. So I definitely, as you mentioned, I'm a professor and I'm a teacher. I come from a long line of teachers. So I love teaching. And so I teach at a couple of universities, both undergrad and MBA, but also exec ed, which I love because it's people who are in the middle of it. They're in the trenches immediately so that they can start digging with the power tools that we give them immediately, like you. And that's very gratifying. So I love teaching. I also do keynotes and trainings as well. And so I put it in that bucket. I am also a consultant. I have what I call industry ADD, where I don't want to just work in education or don't just want to work in the arts. I like working across all of them and cross-pollinating. And consulting really allows me to do that. I jokingly say that as a consultant, you're half mechanic, half therapist, where you go into an organization, you understand its pain point, and we work with nonprofits, government, socially responsible businesses. But then sometimes the pain point is really related to personalities or things that are holding the organization back. And that's the therapy part. And then I'm also a writer. I have explored lots of different creative professions. One of these days, knock on wood, I will find the thing that is really my creative thing. But writing is probably right now the thing I love the most. As you said, I write a weekly blog. We're actually putting together a compilation of all those blogs in our anniversary edition at the end of this year. And I'm also working on a book right now. So writing is my creative exploration. So I would say those are my 3 professional hats.
I love that. And congratulations about the book.
You will absolutely get one.
I would love that. You're listening to Dance Behind the Screen podcast. Let's explore the future of dance together. In today's conversation, I'd love to really focus our conversation around tips and tangible takeaways for independent artists or emerging arts organizations who might be in a similar place to No Box Dance. And we are really wanting to help them to define or redefine their mission, vision, and values and what it takes to create a strategic plan. So really, we're just condensing everything that you taught us in the 9-10 months we were in this arts accelerator into what I think might be some of the most important kind of get started conversation points for our listeners.
As I said, you guys were our A+ students. So at this point, you could be teaching everybody all these things. So I'm looking forward to sharing more.
Thanks, Suzanne. I don't think we're ready to teach it. We're still trying to figure it out ourselves.
Everybody is. That's the thing. The nonprofit space is only 75 years old. So we're still trying to figure out what works in this space.
What do you think our arts organizations are doing right when it comes to accelerating social change?
I really turn to arts organizations from a creative point of view. And so to me, I never have to worry about arts organizations when it comes to the creative process that they go through and how embedded they are in their community and really understanding their audience. I think that's the thing I love about artists in general. Just even being around artists to me is like one of my favorite things because they explore, like I said, so many different disciplines in order to come up with their art. They help me in many ways. And a lot of the art I have seen has influenced my work. That's why I call social alchemy is because I saw it in an art exhibit. And there's a number of things I've pulled in from museums and dances that I've actually seen. And I would say what we get really right and I will put them in two different categories. There's the art, who's the art entrepreneur, but then there's the arts organization. And I'm going to put them together, but we can separate them. Usually they're creative. It's usually really on point and they're at the edge of where society needs to be. And they're always pushing the envelope around the social issues that we need to be tackling. So whether it's the environment or social justice, the art has always been one of the things that has pushed society and culture forward. And that is one of the things I love the most about making sure our artists continue to get the support they need to continue to do their craft.
That's great. And I love in our time together for the Talk Arts Accelerator, you recommended Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Where do you recommend people start if they're wanting to develop or refine their mission, vision, values, and start with their strategic planning? And I thought maybe we could start if you could talk about the differences between vision and mission, because I think from my own experience too, these are honestly like confusing how to differentiate the two. So when you're starting that creation process or you're wanting to go back and edit what you already have, could you define the difference in the two and what's a good place to start?
You are not alone. Even when I was in your shoes and I was in the nonprofit space, I felt like there was confusion. And so part of what I had tried to do over the last 16 years with my blog, but also my consulting firm, is really say, if we're going to say words like impact or we're going to say words like sustainability, let's break down what they actually mean, number one, and have a common definition, then break down the process of how to get there, because everybody having the same definition is really important, but also really making sure we give people the tools. And I believe in DIY tools. I think all of this stuff is stuff that people should be able to do on their own. So really the first thing that is important for any entrepreneur, and I consider arts organizations entrepreneurial, is to get clarity on who you are and how you're different than everybody else. So your unique value proposition. And so for nonprofits, your vision and mission are two really central parts. And so before you even get into vision and mission, you really need to be thinking about unique value proposition, which is a Venn diagram of what are your customer needs and wants? What are you uniquely gifted at? You're better than everybody else. And then where are your competitors? Because in general, you don't want to be supplying into the community something everybody else is doing. You want to be doing something that's unique to you. And so oftentimes what I find with arts organizations is what they get right is that creative process. What they sometimes stumble over is really explaining what they are to the community. It's really drinking your own Kool-Aid. Like you understand it. And sometimes artists are so vanguard, if they're in the vanguard and the avant-garde, that they have a struggle with actually explaining it to other people. So you get it just like that. But unfortunately, we live in a time where people only really have a couple of seconds to really listen to you and decide, am I going to pay attention to this? Because there's so much noise in the world. So One is getting clarity in your message, but then also getting enough stickiness so that as we buzz about in the world and there's a lot of noise, we stay on the flower that is most interesting to us. And you want to be that flower as the artist or the arts organization where you're like, oh, this is unique and different, and it is for me. So vision and mission. So when I talk about vision and mission, those are the centerpieces of an arts organization. I think actually people can have them too. I have a vision statement. I have a personal mission statement. You can, as an artist, as an individual, have them too. But for purposes of us talking about this, let's talk about it from an arts organization perspective. A vision is really, if you were to put a target at the end of a wall and you were like, that's the target I want to hit. In general, other people can have that vision too. In communities, it could be that we want to be a place where the creative economy flourishes, or that we want to be the go-to place for this particular thing. At an organizational level, it could be solving for homelessness. If the world accomplished what you wanted to accomplish, and in theory, the nonprofit would cease to exist if that vision was accomplished, what would that vision look like? The reason why a vision is so important is because that's your rallying cry. That's how people are like, I believe in that vision too, and I'm going to help you get there. It's also why it's okay for other organizations or other arts groups to have somewhat similar visions, not identical, but similar, because you're all aiming to the same thing. And then your mission is your unique arrow. And that's why in a dance community context, you can have lots of different dance companies, but you've got to be clear on how are the differences between the dance companies. So this group is doing this and this group is doing that. And we unfortunately don't have much arts education. So most of our consumers don't really even understand the differences between the different dances. So we have to be careful about helping people describe what we do in such a way that the average consumer gets it immediately. And they are like, I'm on board with that. I want to experience that. I want to donate to that vision I agree with, or I'm willing to try it. So vision and mission really provides you that scaffolding to start your storytelling messaging.
Definitely. I feel like in our time with you, the vision and mission conversation really provided NoBox with that blueprint. So we set this as our blueprint and then we can build from here. I'd love to go behind the screens a bit of our conversations as we were in the Arts Accelerator with you. I think at the beginning, we were certainly an organization created by artists for artists that everything we did felt like so confusing to the average consumer as you're talking about, even in our naming, right? We capitalize the NO and the BOX, and every kind of detail to us is this avant-garde expression of how we're thinking outside of the box. But I'll never forget, like at one of our earlier conversations with you, I just don't think you even understood what we were doing at all.
It was saying to people, I don't know. I think there's a lot of strength and courage in saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I want to know. And to be honest, you sold me. And then I was like, okay, now I need to figure out how the organization is going to sell me, because at the end of the day, the leader is usually the tip of the spear, but you need the whole spear. And so, yes, I was like, I don't really understand what you're trying to do. Like, it didn't compute in my head really quickly.
Have that clear language, even in our mission or our vision. And I think what we worked, and I have to say thanks to you, you helped us create this language of calling NoBox a dance think tank. And immediately with those three words, people are able to then grasp and visualize the work that we're doing, because we're not a traditional dance company. We're not presenting work on stage. It's not our necessarily choreography, for instance, which when people think of a dance company, that's often what they think of. Or a repertory company who's presenting other people's works, but this is the company of the dancers. In our conversations with you, we were able to find the right language to describe what it is that we're doing and how we're doing it. But I'd love to hear more of your internal dialogue when you were trying to figure out what we were doing and how you were able to help us find that language of dance think tank.
So you're giving me more credit than I probably deserve. But here's the thing. I think, first of all, one of the hardest parts about entrepreneurship is that you get caught in your own head and you think about it all day, every day, and you're trying to communicate with a world that doesn't think about you at all. Person. I'm a failed elementary school ballet dancer. So that's the last time I ever practiced dance. And I unfortunately went to public school. So I never really got much art exposure, definitely not dance. And so what I learned is in adulthood. And so I've taught myself all the different things. And obviously I'm still like an amateur in my knowledge and understanding. So I was the perfect audience for you because I am a person who loves dance and loves new things in dance and loves innovation, but I still didn't understand what you were doing. I think a lot of art organizations and artists have to really spend time with people who are outside of their box and really get in the shoes of the people that they're trying to serve and really figuring out what messaging is going to help get some traction. So here's what's interesting about Think Tank. What you guys are essentially a market maker. So, unlike a lot of things like modern dance or ballet, everybody knows the Nutcracker. Everybody knows kind of modern dance. You guys are in a category of yourselves. And so sometimes with market makers, you have a double competitive challenge. You're not only trying to sell your organization, but you're trying to create a space that doesn't exist. Steve Jobs did that with the iPhone. And there's lots of market makers out there, but you have to spend more time helping people understand that they need and want this thing that you're doing before they sell. So what I was trying to do is come up with a word that sparked people enough because you at least have a sense of what a think tank is. And then they start asking you more questions, and then you can start unraveling, and this is how we do this, and this is how we do that. And it's a little bit like fishing. You just need lure, and then you can hook them once they start asking more questions and building around the organization. So really the mission and vision have to be just enough to get people to be like, oh, I'm interested in this. And then you can hook them on all the details and how you do it and educate them on what's next in dance. So that was really, honestly, it was one of those eureka moments. I'm a research geek. And to me, if you were a dance think tank, I'd be like, I need to learn more. So it was honestly me just putting myself in my own shoes and saying, okay, what would get me to be more excited about this organization and want to donate and learn more? And I think in one of our brainstorming sessions, and we do this in our storytelling session, it's basically an ideation session where we were just throwing stuff up at the wall to see what sticks. And I happened to utter the words think tank, and you guys resonated with it. And I think the rest is history.
Thank you, Suzanne, for going down that journey. I think it can be really useful for our listeners to be reminded of how important it is to get somebody outside of your field, outside of your box, as you said, because I think that's a problem we had identified in our organization, which we have since created steps to change. But we all met in graduate school together. So even our understanding in dance, we all received our MFAs from the same program, was just specific and limiting. So it was extremely helpful to be a part of this program and have people such as yourself to help us see what we couldn't see anymore. I'd love to talk a little bit about strategic planning, which, as I said before the recording, this is certainly your kingdom, your area of expertise. When it comes to strategic planning, can you describe what is strategic planning for those who have no idea what it is?
Okay, so again, this is also one of those things where it's a little bit of the eye of the beholder, and different people will define it different ways. But I want to start first with the thing that's the most important, which is strategy. So, strategy is the most important part of really anybody's lives. So, today I got up first thing in the morning and I was strategic in how I was going to spend my time. And the most important decision any individual can make is how do they spend their time in a given day. And you can go through the world and just decide you're going to go from moment to moment, or you can get up in the morning and say, okay, what's the most urgent thing? What's the most important thing? The problem is most of us are being led through life versus creating that life for ourselves and spending the time and energy on the things that are going to matter the most. So it's very similar to organizations. Is without some type of a strategy, they're just going to move from moment to moment, activity to activity, and there isn't going to be a clear strategy. And the external world somewhat knows that. So in addition to the clarity part where you got to get your messaging right, you also have to have behind the scenes something that actually makes sense to people and it feels consistent. And so the example I always talk about is the Wizard of Oz. Like the Wizard of Oz and the illusion out front looked great, and it was just one guy. And so most organizations and most artists behind the scenes are put together with duct tape and bubble gum, and people, even if they don't see it, they experience it in the work that you do, and it breaks the illusion of, and because you guys are doing art, you don't want to break that illusion. So it's really important for arts organizations and artists to recognize what they put in front of people is really important. But that back engine is also really important because it creates what we call an overall experience. And even if you were to talk to Fortune 500 marketing people, they would say they're not in the product and service business anymore. They're in the experience business. And experience for you guys is everything from they're going to your website to them ordering tickets to them deciding if they're going to go get dinner beforehand to what they visualize online and it being a seamless experience to their experience in the actual moment. And do they feel welcome? Do they feel like they're comfortable when they leave? What does that experience look like? Was it personalized to them? And that's really what a strategic plan does. Is a strategic plan basically gives you an opportunity to say, here's where we are in our organizational life cycle. And here is all of the stuff that we need to do to make sure that the art is always front and center, but the back office also feels consistent. The strategy part is how we're going to move forward in the world and how we're going to strategically align ourselves. And so I tell people it's moving away from the day-to-day checkers game and moving into a chess game. So, how are you going to strategically position yourself in the environment relative to your competitors? And what are the best strategic moves you can make as an organization, given where you are today? And your moves are going to be different based on where you are in the life cycle. Are you in the idea stage, barely starting? Are you in the mature phase and you've been around for a while, but you could be coming obsolete? Every strategic plan is slightly different based on where they are in the life cycle and how every part of the components that goes into making the organization work, both the art as well as the back office, comes together in a fluid manner so that people come to the organization and they have a quality experience with every interaction they have.
That's great. And I think one thing that I can identify that No Box Dance has really benefited from having this clear strategic plan is the simplicity of it. Although it took us, 9 months to actually create, the simplicity and understanding of the strategic plan has been extremely helpful for internal communications and alignments around what either fits in our programming or doesn't, what fits in our time, what doesn't. It's just really helped us to streamline how we're operating internally. And then we've been able to share our plan publicly too. We copied Taka and put it on our website and have shared on our social channels. And we've actually received a lot of feedback from some of our community members about how appreciative they are just seeing what we're doing and what we're trying to do to really clear up that educational point of teaching people what is a dance think tank and how we're doing that work. But I want to talk more about strategic planning for maybe someone who doesn't have the 9 months and the time to really dig in to each of the sections like we did. If someone maybe had 30 minutes or an hour and they're just trying to build something quick, how would you recommend they get started?
That's a really great question. And so, really, what I look for in a strategic planning process is you get that clarity. So, everybody agreeing on where you guys want to go in this strategic planning process. So, the next 3 years. So, everybody's pointing in the direction and rowing in the same direction. You're building up capacity. So, figuring out where do you need to be versus where could you be. And then, are there areas where you can shore up? And then it's also that courage part. So clarity, capacity, and courage. And I don't mean courage in like a superhero way, kind of courage from a strategic point of view of what do you say yes and what do you say no to? Because at the end of the day, that's the strategy is you got to figure out what you're doing. The plan is really just a strategic guidance document to get everybody aligned, to get everybody connected to what does success look like. And then you say yes or no to certain things at that time. So if you don't have a whole lot of time to go through it, most people don't have 9 months to do it. The Talk Accelerator was one about creating a plan, but it was also about building your capacity. So a couple of things that I do with folks who really need more of a strategic action plan is really getting clear on their messaging and doing some messaging exercises to make sure if their vision and mission is really crystal clear. We have some stuff on our website that kind of walks people through. If they're pretty satisfied with their vision and mission statement, they could also then shift to values. So if you'll remember, we did values work as well. And values work is relatively new in the nonprofit space, but it is pretty big in the for-profit space. And here's why it's also important. And to me, I call it the holy trinity of vision, mission, and values, is because vision says, here's where we're going. mission is here's our arrow. But at the end of the day, you need to build an army of people that are going to actually shoot that arrow. And so you got to have a really clear understanding of who you want to attract to the organization and what's going to work for your culture. Or you could be really entrepreneurial, or you're going to be all about spirit, or what is it going to look like? And I think having that team-based culture, particularly in the art community, is so important because most of the time we hear about the lone artist out there doing their stuff. But what we know about art is it is a team-based sport. You could have the lead actor out there doing their job, but the reality is there's so many people behind the scenes that make that performance work, and the crew and everybody behind it. And so having a good culture, I think, makes or breaks an organization from a strategy perspective. So having those three things, then I think we have a tool online that if you're an arts organization, you could look at, which is both the flywheel as well as the life cycle, either the board or staff or both, just circle where they are. And they may be in the growth phase relative to their impact, which most arts organizations are because they spend most of their time and energy on their work. And then let's just say on the impact side, they're far along, but their brand, they're behind. They're in the startup phase. You can see why that creates what we call growing pains. And I always joke about this because I'm a Texan, your impact or your product or your art is your steak, but the brand is your sizzle. So if you're not doing enough sizzle complementing, the steak's not going to go anywhere. You got to create enough of that to get people to show up, or to get people to sign up, or to get people to tune in. And obviously, if you have drag in your sizzle, you're going to have a really hard time raising the money to support what you're doing. So I would say go through that life cycle and see what do you need to shore up and decide what are some of the things you need to do. So maybe it's updating your website. Maybe it's getting more involved in social media. Maybe it's that you need to move beyond a friends and family board and you need to have outside people on your board who are equally excited about your mission so that you can build your network and you can build your scope of people who know about the organization. Choose those activities that you really need to do. And then you just put that in an action plan, a 1-year action plan. And it's no different than what I do at the beginning of the year, New Year's resolutions. These are the things you've chosen to do. Everybody's agreed to them. And hopefully you'll start seeing traction on those action items. And those will allow you to strategically move in that direction. And then to your point, you posted on a website that you have a strategic plan. People are like, oh, this person has their act together. We like people who are strategic and transparent. And it will invite people to then want to be part of the mission, or to have greater clarity around your mission, or build trust with you as an organization. So a funder will see it and be like, wow, they posted their strategic plan on the website. Only the best nonprofits do that. Because it is a little bit of a calling card to have a strategic plan. Only more sophisticated organizations really do. So that'd be my thoughts is you can totally DIY it. And all of those kind of DIY stuff is on our websites. And so you can at socialimpactarchitects.com. We also publish on Substack. And so you should be able to find that on there. And if you have questions, you can certainly have listeners reach out to me.
Wonderful. And we'll for sure link all of that out in our show notes as well. We're so grateful that you offer all of those things for free on your website. Suzanne, from your perspective, what do you think are key strategic qualities that define a resilient arts organization today?
It's interesting. Resilience to me is going back to the clarity, capacity, and courage. It really is to me clarity and purpose, knowing who you are and what you're wanting to achieve. Right now, I think it's agility in your operations with the introduction of AI. Before that, it was IT being a horizontal. Before that, it was talent management versus HR. But the world is shifting around us. And so you've really got to shift with it. And so anybody who's running a company individually with other people needs to have that level of agility. And then I would also say, like I said, the courage and recognizing courage to me isn't just forging ahead, but it's also being able to not be able to answer a question and say, I don't know, but I'm going to have the courage to say, I'm going to go find the expert in AI and figure out how I could get tutored in this particular thing, or the courage to say, I need to bring in somebody who's an expert in board governance because that's not my thing. So that's also something I remind entrepreneurs of is that they don't have to know it all. They just need to have lots of resources and a good support system.
This is Dance Behind the Screen, where technology, strategy, and creativity collide. Suzanne, what advice would you offer to the next generation of arts leaders who are working at the intersection of creativity and the arts?
I have no doubt these folks are my students and these are folks that I connect with. No doubt they have such great ideas. I think the thing I would continue to remind them of is that the idea exists in an ecosystem of an audience. And so always being deeply connected to your audience, not talking above them, but really bringing the audience along for the ride. You don't want anybody sitting in the audience not understanding something you just said or feeling like they're an outsider and they're uncomfortable because they don't understand something. And so I think that you really want to be audience centered. And then I would also say that really making sure that the behind the scenes part really mirrors the creative part. Like I said, you break the illusion for the audience if the ticketing process is terrible, the parking is terrible, or it's difficult to get online, or you can't get online, or you want the full seamless experience. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to stuff that was a little bit avant-garde and it was in a neighborhood and the parking wasn't easy for me to figure out, or I didn't get all the details that I needed, or the wayfinding was difficult. Communities that are trying to become cultural districts, also reminding them that we're a multicultural environment. And so we need to create experiences that are accessible to people. Like we needed an elevator because people had mobility issues. So just really trying to think about the audience and thinking about what their needs are and making them feel comfortable from the moment that they start the art experience. And then to follow up with them and say, we're so glad you were here, figuring out how they turn from being a one-time patron into a long-term patron. That conversion process. How do you make them a part of your family? People want to belong right now. They want to belong to things. They want to belong to new ideas. They want to be at the edge of whatever is next. I think artists do such a great job of creating that, but I think they don't always do a good job of bringing people along for the ride and helping them be part of it, be part of the art.
I think that's something that's so important. And a conversation we have a lot on this podcast actually is about creating this like audience centered experience, especially with dance. We talk about it feeling like a secret club where it's if you don't understand what's happening, you're just sitting there like feeling left out. Am I missing something? What's going on here? And then leaving the event, being like, yeah, it was really cool, but like I have no idea what was happening and feeling left out. Do you recommend people create these audience centered experiences without putting the work on the audience member? And what I mean by that is at NoBooks, oftentimes we'll send out all these surveys and maybe we'll get 2 replies because people don't want to sit and do a survey, or we try to ask people questions in person at the events. And that seems to be the most honest and real feedback that we receive is just like having conversation. But we're not like in writing it down and have this like concrete data of exactly what they said. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm just spitballing here because I have not really thought about this at a deep level, but I do think there's a lot of survey fatigue out there. And that's one of the reasons why I've had people shift away from surveys and do more design thinking, where they're really trying to put themselves in the shoes of the audience and maybe even having the audience either at the forefront or including people who are not the professionals in experience creation. And so I think the more you can involve people who are not in the middle of things, I think is good. And that's why I like design thinking exercises is like design thinking allows you to have various prompts of what could go horribly wrong. And you're thinking, okay, this could go horribly wrong. Or what is the experience before the people show up at the door? Or do we want to do something that is meaningful before they show up? Or do we want to have some type of little cue card? Or do we want to have, I think, one of the things I love that Titus is doing right now, Charles Santos is doing such a great job. I call them like inside the actor studio type things where he describes, I went to South Africa. This is what I saw. They blend this and they blend that. And this is what they're going to do. So he almost is giving me a little bit of a tutorial where I come in smart and prepared, and he prepares me for that surprise and delight moment. So I do think that The people who I see do that, or I think coming across very successfully, the ticket driver too. So it's a punch where it's bringing people in and acquainting them with these new art or a spin on the art, but it also has been driving ticket sales and butts and seats because people will buy the tickets and then no show, but it gets people to say, oh, I don't want to miss this thing because it is so cool. So when they get home on a Friday and they're like, I'm exhausted, but I really have to go. I'm on the edge of my seat trying to figure out what this South African dance troupe is going to do. I've got to go. So it helps on a lot of levels. So I think we got to do more of that, particularly since arts education is not as high of a priority right now, to bring people into the art and give them a little bit of that exclusive stuff to start with that gets them excited and helps them be on the inside and not the outsider looking in trying to figure out what's going on.
Definitely. Do you have any tips for kind of that post-experience follow-up in a similar vein that's not survey oriented? I think we get so many emails too that
We do.
it's just
We
like
do.
you want to support, you want to read, but do you really have time to read through and click through the full email?
I totally agree. I think that he does his videos and it doesn't have to be professional. It can just be something you post on Facebook. I also think that I have gone back to paper surveys because people are sitting there waiting for the performance or they're at the halfway point in the intermission and they don't have anything to do. And then one of the things we did is with a couple of different clients, they put it in a vase outside and then they drew and actually people got raffle. It was like a raffle type thing. And you get more from that. And keep in mind, then everybody does it. And the research suggests that the people who actually return the survey are your most valuable customers anyway. So they're most likely going to say either really positive things or really things they're annoyed about. So you won't hit that middle, which is, I think the middle is like where the real learning is. And then I also think too, it allows you to get participation, like they're bought into you at that moment. So I would say spot surveys is really helpful. And then doing some type of raffle where as they leave, people are asking for your survey. I think any of that would be what I would suggest. But you're so right. We're in this moment where there's a ton of survey and email fatigue. So I think we've got to think outside the box on those things to get true audience feedback.
Exactly. Suzanne, is there anything that we haven't talked about today that you think would be really important for you to share with our listeners?
The one thing I would say is with all the change that's going on, I would hope that no one out there is discouraged. I think one of the things that artists to me are entrepreneurs. In fact, the universities where I work and I am involved in their strategic planning, I personally think a good entrepreneurship class should be required for any artist. Because to me, like once you have the art part and then you have the entrepreneurship part, you're a really powerful combo. And you also create, like you said, that resiliency. But I think in this world we live in, it can be discouraging because we're almost leapfrogging where we were in the past. I want people that are starting arts organizations and others to not be discouraged because we need them. We need their fresh perspective. And the fact that we're almost reinventing ourselves as a society, we're in this 80-year pivot point, the difference between the horse and buggy and the automobile or the printing press, where we're in these really interesting moments. And we need people who are pioneers who are just going to think differently about the space. And I think artists always think differently. So if they compare it with business acumen and that entrepreneurial curiosity, they're going to be unstoppable. I hope in this moment, excited and not discouraged. They're curious and not complacent. All the things that I think are important to being an entrepreneur.
I think that's the perfect segue to asking you, how do you say yes to the future?
How do I say no to the box and yes to the future? I think that one of the things that has stuck with me, I was born in 1976 and my grandmother did patchwork quilts and she entered the patchwork quilt into the State Fair of Texas and she won. I still have the quilt and the ribbon. For whatever reason, that has stuck with me. And I've just become a patchwork quilt of every person I've ever met, every idea I've ever encountered. What I think I do really is I am constantly evolving myself like a snake or any other kind of thing that is constantly shedding skin and moving on to the next thing. And I take what serves me and move it forward. I release the thing that no longer serves me. I just keep integrating new patterns into who I am. And I would say that's what's kept me fresh, but also still grounded in who I am and my values and what's important to me. I would say that's how I've done it. Continue to be moving, growing, evolving, learning from all of you. I always learn from everybody I meet. So I would say that's probably the thing that is my secret. I come by it honestly with coming from the people I grew up with.
Flash forward.
Suzanne, we have our final segment, which is our Flash 4, where we ask all our guests to answer 4 questions in a flash. Are you ready? If you had to recommend a resource to our audience, what would it be?
So I mentioned this earlier, but Made to Stick, my good friends Dan and Chip Heath. Dan teaches at Duke as well. It's really the Bible for clarity, but it also is with stickiness. Like, how do you get stuff to stick? And in this world, we need stuff to stick with all the noise. So I'd say Made to Stick.
What was the first dance you saw?
So the first dance I saw, I was obviously in a ballet in my elementary school years, but I'm not going to count that because I was terrible. I do not have the grace of dancers. That's why I love going to dance myself. But it was Alvin Ailey's Revelation. And the name was so appropriate. It was a revelation. Like, I never knew dance could be that way. And it was not only a transformative experience for me of understanding dance, but I felt something like in my very core and being. And even as I talk about it right now, I feel it. I would say that was my first dance, and it's gotten me engaged in the dance community in a different way than I did before.
Do you think social media has a positive influence on the dance world, yes or no?
So I would say yes. Like, I think that it democratizes exposure and gives people access and bringing in new audiences. And so it makes dance visible and valuable. But I also worry a little bit. Social media also creates these comparisons where people have stopped trying because they're continuing to look at the swim lane next to them versus just owning their race and just pushing forward. The only person you're competing with is the person you were yesterday. Social media is great, but it unintentionally causes us to compare ourselves with the perfect version of the other organization or the other person. And that's not really a fair comparison.
What is your favorite social media platform?
So I love LinkedIn for thought leadership, and then I love Instagram for inspiration. I think I go to Instagram and I see all sorts of really cool creative things, and it's like it feeds my left brain, right brain. So I go back and forth between the two.
That's great. Suzanne, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us. How can our listeners stay connected with you and everything you're up to?
You can certainly follow me on Substack. I'm a big Substack fan now. I think it's a great forum for thought leadership in a world where journalism is shifting. I think it's a great way to be exposed to ideas of thought leaders. I think Substack is doing a great job of that. We are going to be putting out a compilation of all of our blogs in the coming months. And so you can actually go to our website and sign up, and you'll be one of the ones who gets the digital download when it first comes out around the holiday timeframe. I think the other way would just be to stay in touch. We're going to be launching in this fall a new series where anybody can ask me a question. I'm going to try to answer one question a week or maybe more, just depending on how many questions I get. A little bit like the old Dear Abby, but really more for people who are entrepreneurs and nonprofit organizations. It'll be like an instant burst. And so we'll be doing that. So just get in touch with us and stay in touch with us and join this community of people who want to be change makers in the world.
Well, I love that. And we will, of course, link everything out in the show notes. Thank you again, Suzanne. And to our listeners, as always, keep dancing behind the screen. Until next time. From No Box Dance, I'm Martheya. Stay curious, stay creative, and keep moving forward.
Thanks for taking your time to tune into Dance Behind the Screen, a bi-monthly interview series where we go behind the screen to question process, product, and social media. Be sure to follow us on social media at KNOW Box Dance. See you next time, and don't forget to say no to the box.